Horlicks Network 18, Mission Poshan, Bhavishya Roshan.
Now over to Zaka Jacob for Face Off. Zaka, it's good to see politicians.
You've written this book that we are all waiting for. What does this tell us about Imran Khan that many of us may not know? Now, in his political capacity, he's preparing to contest the position of Prime Minister. Is there something the electorate needs to know, or you think they need to know, that they don't already?
The main thrust of the book is basically about how we as individuals, whether we are sort of journalists or informed people of the media, people who have a keen interest in politics, people from political families, I think that we don't really know what we're voting for. And it's not so much because...
When you say we don't know, you're talking about Imran Khan.
I'm talking
that
about...
people didn't know what they voted for when they voted him.
I didn't, so I speak from my perspective, but it's not only about Imran, it is actually about even, for example, here in the UK. I've voted before, I voted in Pakistan in 2013. So I traced why what's this frame of mind we are in when we go to vote. What is the information that is to hand? And it's interesting because more than other people, you'd expect a person who's a journalist who's covering certain issues to know a little bit better. But I argue whether we do really know what we are voting for. And in this instance, when I voted in 2013, I didn't really know what I was voting for.
You voted in 2013 for who?
For Imran.
Right.
I voted for...
Would you do that again?
No.
Why not?
Well, they've not done anything in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and so it's of course a problem across Pakistan. But you see, when you vote for someone who pretends or professes to be different, you have higher expectations. And the fact is that we have seen the same sort of politics, or even perhaps much less strength in addressing some issues. So, for example, child protection units in 11 districts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa have recently been shut down. Now, child protection is a huge issue with 22.7 million children out of school in Pakistan.
It no doubt is a huge issue. But let's talk about military protection to Imran Khan. He is a leader who has spoken very strongly against the military. In fact, at one meeting he said that generals are cowards, that a general would pee in his trousers if confronted with a crowd of 20,000. And now clearly he is contesting this from the lap of the military. Does this change surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me, armed with what I know, and it won't surprise you when you read the book that I've just written. And a lot of people...
What does it say that would lead me to think as you think I might?
It gives you an insight into, like I said, a voter, a journalist, how we actually unconsciously sometimes propagate or a part of the propaganda machinery, like I was, unconsciously. And also it obviously gives you an insight into what sort of a human being he is, what sort of a...
Specifically what?
Well, the fact that, what you hinted about, the fact that he's constantly been changing his position on the military, if you just isolate that one issue, a lot of people, when they go to vote for someone, say, for example, they're voting for Modi ji, they pretty much know what they're getting. And I think that's the problem with all the parties now. We don't know what we are voting for. If we're voting for someone because we think he's liberal, and then we see him promoting a very strong Islamist agenda, we get a bit confused.
You mentioned the Islamist agenda. Do you see him as pushing that agenda?
You see, I would be fine with anyone promoting a certain religious agenda if they believed in it. And equally, I wouldn't have a problem with someone who is, say, very pro-military, because again, you would know where you stand. But with Imran, what I explore in the book as well, and I think it's a lot of people know about it, but of course, I have a position of authority because I've seen the human side, the inside of, what he's inside when the makeup is off and when, when the cameras are off. And so I give you that insight as well, which was frustrating for me.
Would that suggest some sort of opportunism?
Well, yes, I would be brave enough to say that if you are constantly, people have referred to the fact that he's Mr. U-turn, and so that is what I found really frustrating, because, and there's a famous line in the book where I say that, I won't be voting for you next year. Next coming elections. I say that when I was his wife, and he just laughed, and I thought, well, I don't know what you're about. And so with the Islamist agenda, it's not an Islamist agenda, it is an agenda which will secure votes. So if you're using the right bank vote only to become a prime minister, I have a problem with that. If you really believed in it, I would have very little to criticize. as an individual, maybe I wouldn't vote for you, but at least people would know. But the fact that they're constantly sort of changing loyalties is not something that I'm comfortable with. The biggest, I think, worry is the fact that if you look at, even if you don't look at the book, if you look at just the past 6 months or so, the decisions that have been taken make anyone, even his backers, if he has any, it should make them very nervous, because he can't stick to.
Like
for
what?
example, I mean, there have been certain inclusions in the party of people who have been charged for gang rape, for example. And so when I am voting for change, I don't see that change. The idea, the reason we voted for Imran was because he was against the status quo. And if you become a cheaper version, a cheap copy of the status quo, even, you know, actually, how sad a comment is it that the PMLN and the Pakistan People's Party are actually looking cleaner than PTI at the moment. I feel strongly that there's a serious risk of handing a country, handing the reins of a country to someone or an individual who is not only backed by people who want to divide us into very extremist groups, which we have seen, standing with extremist groups.
By present indications, you'd be happy to go with an aggressive policy on India if that were to suit the military?
Well, you see, this is again very, very nerve-wracking for us, because we are a nuclear-empowered country, and so we cannot have. The whole point of a politician is, and I know that our military gets a lot of criticism, but you see, we've not had strong politicians. I firmly believe that if we had better representation, the military would take guidance from politicians, because that's how policy is made.
In the end, Ms. Khan, some leaked reports about the content of your book suggest that you have chapters on boys and girls and sex and drugs and rock and roll. That's one. Sounds colorful. Another on heroin and cocaine. Are these matters you take up in the book, and do any of these have a bearing on what you say about Imran Khan?
The book is an in-depth book about my life and my relationships, and how those relationships and the problems in those relationships, both mine and my partners, how do they have an impact on the future or the futures of all Pakistanis, and in fact people in our region.
And those matters particularly?
So I've discussed morality, and I've discussed morality in terms of nepotism, meritocracy or the lack of it. I've discussed sexual harassment. I've discussed sexual coercion and how it is used, how sexual favors are used for political positions, for media positions. And some of them are directly related to Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, and
Imran Khan particularly, personally?
Well, I suppose that, you know, people at the top have to take responsibility of what happens in their household and in the party. Are we talking about indirect
responsibility, or are we speaking about anything potentially more than that?
Both.
And that is something you do take up in this book.
Yes.
Direct involvement in the kind of issues that we spoke of a minute back.
Yes. Direct involvement.
We are speaking of Imran Khan.
Direct involvement in positions or nepotism or favors which have nothing to do with merit, which have to do with nepotism, which have to do with bypassing meritocracy.
But we were speaking of a little more than that. We were speaking about sex, drugs.
Yes, I'm talking about sexual favors, sexual coercion and sexual harassment, and how that needs to be addressed. And that needs to be said, and I have spoken at length in the book.
Is that the reason people fear this book? Some people?
I think that there's more to it why they fear that, because you see, sadly in Pakistan, and I suppose it's true globally as well, we see this as not such a big problem. And I think that sexual coercion and sexual favors that's the problem, is seen as acceptable. If people are in power, if a man is in power, it is seen as something that is almost something that I should turn a blind eye to. The society should turn a blind eye to. Is that something
you had reason to discover as someone who is married to Imran Khan?
I have led my life as a role model for my daughters and for other women. And I say repeatedly in the book that I'm not here because of anything unprincipled. And it's not because of a lack of offers, but it's just that I think that you go further without giving favors. And I'm very clear about past experiences also where I've turned down jobs on that basis. And I've made it very clear to the girls who have had to compromise or who feel that they have to compromise that they shouldn't have to feel that they need to be pressurized into or coerced into a position. I'm a strong proponent of standing up for what you believe in.
And there are women out there who have reason to have such apprehensions, and in relation to Imran Khan.
Yes, and there is, and why I've talked about it is because, you see, I feel very strongly that if one woman has or can compromise, another woman who perhaps deserves the position will lose her career. And that is the biggest problem across the world, where some people will compromise, but a large number of women will not be able to compromise.
In the very end, any examples you can share of this?
There are certain bits of very specific instances. So I've not spoken loosely in the book, and of course, because the book is not published.
Specific instances of what?
Of sexual harassment or sexual favors. There are specific incidents in relation to certain positions, and I've been very specific about them. And the reason I can't give you a little bit more titillating facts is because there's been a lot of obviously lies being spread already, which I think is taking away from the book, because to be quite honest, it doesn't really matter to me as much. Morality is important to me, but if somebody does something in their own time, say for example you do something after 7 p.m. in your private life, that should not be my concern. But if you turn up to my office in a particular state, or you carry on in a work sphere like that, where it poses a problem to your boss or to your colleagues, then it's a problem. So I've discussed those incidents which relate particularly to abuse of power.
And you believe people should keep such issues in mind when they take a decision whether to vote for Imran Khan or not?
Well, the reason is quite simply this, that if I'm voting for a representative who is there not because he is capable, competent, has something to contribute to the parliament, because of some intellect, then I think that we are cheating the voters. If you say that this is an upright young man or upright young woman, or an intellectual, but actually that's not the reason why they got, because that's what we voted for. So I think you really need to understand who you're voting for.
Thank you very much, Ms. Khan, for talking to us.